Rewind, your week in review, is sponsored by the Transportation Development Association of Wisconsin. Sharing one goal, enhancing the quality of life in Wisconsin through the development and maintenance of a strong transportation network. The Transportation Development Association of Wisconsin. It's how we get there.
Because I don't want to go backwards. I want to keep going forward. Together, that's exactly where we're going to go. God bless you.
I'm Steve Walders.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
And this is Rewind, a week dominated by discussions in the Capitol on transportation funding, J.R.
Yes.
Let's take them by day. First day. Monday, we found out that Speaker Voss has produced a video, and it shows him in a ambulance, although he's well, let's make that clear. And he's with his cousin, Mike Voss, and they're going down bumpy roads. And how'd you like to stick in an IV with these bumpy roads, making the point that we need a lot more transportation funding?
Yes.
Did that video, anything in the video surprise you?
No, a little creative from Robin. They're trying to illustrate the impact of what's happening from their perspective, not having enough money for roads. I don't know if it's persuasive for the other side of the building with the Senate Republicans, but that was Robin's way of doing something creative to kind of pitch a message to the voters about, hey, here's an impact you should know.
And it also says it couldn't be me lying in this ambulance. It could be you, and somebody's trying to put an IV in, so watch out. Okay, then hours later, two senators, Senator Dewey Strobel and Chris Kapenga, come out with a Fiscal Bureau paper saying if you had to raise the gas tax, it would, what, double it? Gas tax is 30.9 cents a gallon.
They had two scenarios run by Fiscal Bureau. One is what they call the DOT wish list. Of every project out there, basically, it's in the pipeline with no bonding to do it. It would require going the gas tax from 30.9 cents a gallon up it by 28.1 cents or something like that.
Right, almost double it.
Now, Robin Voss' immediate reaction was, nobody's calling for that.
Right.
So, that said, they also said, okay, what if just the DOT budget request, just as is, with no bonding at all? You call for $500 million new bonding. That would require an increase of 7.2 cents a gallon, just to cover basically a maintenance and local roads budget that the DOT's put forward without any bond.
Well, let's do a TikTok here. So Speaker Voss releases this video in the morning, and then about 3 hours later, the two senators, Strobel and Kapenga, come out with theirs, and then Voss issues a statement later in the afternoon. The two senators are deliberately ignoring the other side of the balance sheet in favor of politics and fear-mongering. Are you surprised that it got to this level of name-calling when we don't even... We haven't even started the new session.
The battle lines have been drawn. It's been clear for a while now that Southern Republicans kind of following the cue of Scott Fitzgerald. They're saying, okay, the governor has the biggest veto pen around, so we're not going to cross him. We can't get past him. What's the point? We're going to go with his proposal, or his idea of, no gas tax hike, no fee increase unless you can offset it somewhere else.
And bond $500 million additional.
We're going to go with that. Yeah. And then Voss and his leadership team, at least, are in place saying, no, we need to look at more revenue. We need a long-term solution because this proposal will kick the can down the road 2 more years for us to deal with it again.
Yeah. Okay. Now, that just happened Monday. That all set the table for Tuesday. There was a hearing before the Assembly Transportation Committee. It went, I think, 7 hours and 40 minutes. The first one to testify was Transportation Secretary Mark Gottlieb.
He was more than 3 hours?
More than 3 hours. And I'm struck by two things he said about, well, how long it would take to finish some projects and how long it would take before we could again plan. So let's listen to Transportation Secretary Gottlieb when he talks about the delay in 5 mega projects in southeast Wisconsin and then how long until we could again plan some major highway upgrades.
Additional projects that would come after the completion of the zoo in 94 north-south. Those would be I-94 east-west in Milwaukee County between 17th Street and 70th Street. The I-894, I-43 bypass project. I-94 east-west in Waukesha County, which would be the section of I-94 in Waukesha County that's west of the west limits of the zoo interchange project. I-43 from Howard Avenue to Silver Spring Drive. And the I-41 project from Burleigh Street to the Richfield interchange in Washington County. The remaining estimated cost of these projects is $4.3 billion. At the rate of funding contained in the department's proposed budget of $122 million per biennium, the number of years to complete that program would be 70 years. Our anticipation would be that we would undertake no new major highway development studies until the year 2046.
So Gottlieb said once we're done with the north-south on the zoo, and once we do the east-west, which Representative Reamer said yesterday costs out at 1.1 to 1.5 billion, depending on what he said. 5 other major projects in southeast Wisconsin, the population and commerce hub, won't be done at the current rate of spending for 70 years. But as you point out, there's a caveat there.
See, the committee gave Gottlieb a series of questions to ask. Okay, with the budget you've proposed, if these fund levels continue, what would happen? Well, I believe roughly, if I remember right, about $122 million are in this current proposal.
That's right, $122 million.
So if that's all you're putting in mega projects, then for 7 years, it would take you that long to do the other projects. But I don't think this budget will be the template for 70 years of transportation funding in Wisconsin.
That's a good point.
2, what's going to happen at the federal level? We don't know. Donald Trump's talked about a $1 trillion infrastructure program or something like that. 1, can he get that done? Because Republicans typically aren't big fans of stimulus packages, right?
How do you pay for it? Do you worsen our $19 trillion deficit?
How do you pay for it? All that kind of good stuff. But if it gets done, we'll, mana rain from heaven from us to go do all these road projects, maybe. And then what's going to happen the next bite? I mean, there's lots of caveats to this, but yes, at a current spending proposal, it would take that long.
But every legislator on that Assembly Transportation has a project that they'd like in their district. And when Gottlieb said, we can't even plan anymore for 40 years, 2056, I mean, how do you think both these numbers, 70 years out and 40 years out, made him sound in terms of defending the budget that the governor ordered him to submit on September 15th? Republicans
ask those questions to put them in a position to say, look, voters, if you want to stay with this, great, but then this is going to happen. So that's part of their plan. They set these questions up to knock the agency proposal. And remember, too, Gottlieb, when he was in the legislature, he's a former lawmaker. He was known as a transportation advocate. His last budget proposal in 2014 called for $750 million in new taxes and fees to cover basically the plan.
None of which got approved.
No.
We bonded $850 million.
Governor proposed $1.3 billion. They cut it back to $500 million, $350 in reserve, and they approved the $350. So there's that. So what's going to happen going forward, we don't know. And is there going to be a long-term plan at some point to try and address transportation funding? I don't think this is going to be the template for every biennium going forward for the rest of my lifetime. Okay, 2 other things before we hear another soundbite. Mr. Gottlieb said the fee to operate a mid-sized car in Wisconsin, the Ford Taurus, going $12,304 a year, which is less than all neighboring states. That's 1 point. Secondly, I was so intrigued. They're so focused on bonding and how much of transportation revenues will go for debt service. It was so curious to me that Gottlieb said, under our projections, debt service payments will stabilize, his word, by 24%, still 1 out of every $4 is going to pay off past debt by the mid-2020s. That was just intriguing. Any thoughts on that? Just a decade ago, we were what, less than 10 cents?
We were about
15?
9, 10, 10%.
So it shows you the reliance on bonding, how it's increased. And there, as you also point out, there's a numerator and denominator in that percentage. So how much revenue do we have, and how much is going to pay off the debt service? So if revenues increase and the bonding payments stay flat, that percentage will shrink. If they stay flat, then yes, it'll stay like that. So
well, okay, the meeting goes on for, I think, 7 hours and 40 minutes. After, I think it was about 4 o'clock, State Representative Joe Sanfilippo was called on, and he said, I am concerned that you're using stainless steel on the bridges in the Zoo Freeway. And by the way, I don't like where Department of Transportation employees are going to conferences and trips. And I don't like the fact that you're not filling 22 vacancies in the State Patrol. So that was interesting. But what was most interesting, and let's hear Sanfilippo bring to a conclusion his criticisms and how the Transportation Secretary Gottlieb answered it.
I recognize you're in a difficult position here, but I think that the department has to take a much more serious look at ways that they can save money. And it really is kind of insulting, to be honest with you, to say that we're going to cut state troopers who are out there doing very important work so that we can continue all of these other things that I think, you know, there's a good argument for that they're not as necessary.
I guess, I don't know if your constituents would rather have their bridges designed by bridge engineers or legislators. I guess that's a question you could ask them too.
Mr. Gottlieb is an engineer. He's a former legislator from southeast Wisconsin, you know, north of Milwaukee, and he went like that to San Filippo. What significance do you attach to that?
Republican lawmakers are hoping for this audit that should be out sometime in the next month, 2 months,
5 or
whatever
6
it's going to
weeks,
be,
I
whatever.
bet.
This audit of DOT to uncover all these areas of inefficiencies they can like pull money from and rearrange things. Maybe they're hoping, like, maybe it's like fingers crossed for that, but what they're looking at is what decisions are you making and why, and is there a way to save money? I mean, Stan Filippo brought up, for example, the style of traffic lights we now install at multi-lane intersections. Are they worth the extra money to do those? He called them ugly. I'm not sure there's a pretty
Traffic
light out there, but whatever. So he said that's excessive. You're using this. He questioned the decisions on the decks of the on ramps and off ramps for the zoo. Right. You're using this different kind of rebar. Does that make sense? The life of the deck can last so long to justify it. So they're picking apart these things, trying to find where can we save money. You ask any Republican who's been critical of DOT, and they'll say roundabouts. We should take away roundabouts.
They're
Robin
cheaper.
Voss will tell you that his report that they did for some Republicans about
no easy answer.
Yes, that roundabouts long term are cheaper to maintain. Everything else. There's also another benefit, they will argue, of fewer crashes or fewer
because cars
dramatic
are going
crashes.
slower. Yes,
cars are going slower, and they're also glancing blows rather than T-bones.
Right.
So anyway, they're looking for ways to save money, and how do you do that? Now, San Filippo's obviously got somebody helping him out to pick through these things, or he's doing a very good job of going over line by line.
One of which he said is you sent a DOT employee to Romania, and overall, Secretary Gottlieb said, you have to understand that most of this travel is paid for with federal and other money. In fact, he at one point laid out the amount of state transportation revenues that's spent on travel, $223,000, $270,000 a year. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
So they're picking apart the budget, say, where can we find money? Now, the thing is, when I talk to people, there are some who are hoping for a big pot out of this. Others are saying it's just not going to be there. Yes, you can take away decorative rails on bridge projects. You can stop doing bike paths, excuse me, but you're not going to find $1 billion in this audit. So now what do you do? That's going to be the big thing if the audit comes out.
Yeah, it is. That audit is not going to say, here's how you save $1 billion. Okay, new subject. That noise we hear in the background is thousands of people recounting ballots and checking voting machines across Wisconsin. The recount will be completed by the Monday deadline, but there was a big order today from a federal judge. Why don't you talk about it?
Two PACs backed Donald Trump, and I think another voter filed a lawsuit trying to stop the recount, arguing it put in jeopardy, essentially, our electoral votes going for Donald Trump. Judge last week said, I'm not going to issue a temporary injunction. Today said, you guys have not made your case. I'm not going to stop the recount. Oh, by the way, I'm not sure you even have standing to challenge this.
Right.
The takeaway, though, from the hearing was Mike Haas, the Elections Commission administrator, saying, we are pretty confident that all 72 counts will finish by 8 p.m. Monday, which is the deadline that the commission set to have the recount done so they get all the results on the next day, that they can then certify them to the feds. And then on the 19th, our electors would meet to cast 10 votes for Donald Trump. So
noon on the 19th in the governor's conference room.
Yes. So as far as we know right now, from what Haas said, we're in good shape. I think as of yesterday, we were 82% complete.
Yep. And Secretary Clinton had gained 556 votes, and President-elect Trump had gained 495, in no way jeopardizing Trump's margin of 22,000 votes.
And what Haas said is, the takeaway will be, yes, this was a lot of burden for the clerks, but we'll find things from this recount that we need to go back and train the clerks on. For example, inappropriate pens, the wrong pens to mark ballots was an issue in one spot. That's something to fix for next time. So things like that will come out of this. It is not the clerk's favorite thing to do, but Haas was putting kind of okay, look, we got something good will come out of this in the end.
Right, and the Jill Stein campaign put up $3.5 million to cover most of these local costs.
We'll see the final tab on that, how much you may owe out on top of that. We'll see.
Right. But the point is, this is a statewide recall of 2.97 million votes, and there's been no major problems, no major shifts, so it kind of vindicates the electoral process in Wisconsin, doesn't it?
You find small problems. Now, the next question is going to be, okay, what would Republicans possibly do to rein in recounts or have a new standard for them going forward? Previously, the margin for a recount that you didn't pay for and the clerks did, or the locals did, was I think half a point. Now it's on a quarter of a point.
Half, yeah.
Because we're getting to a better system where the optical scan ballots are more accurate, it's harder to miscount those. They go through a machine and everything else. Will they look at and say, okay, the margin's fine, but you have to finish in second place to request a recount to prevent another Jill Stein coming in and saying, well, I got, I'm in fourth place, but I'm going to ask for a recount and pay for it. Those things you have to watch the next session.
I'll be curious how many more votes Ms. Stein gets, and when you divide that by 3.5 million, that'll be a rather staggering number.
Yes. It
really will. I had a chance this week to interview DNR Secretary Kathy Stepp on the reorganization. She insisted that the reorganization will not lower, in and of itself, any environmental standards. She said that the changes will let DNR professionals spend more time on regulation and law enforcement. And the agency, as we're about to hear, is full of scientists. Now, the context here are some of these CAFOs, concentrated animal feeding, whatever. Do you know what the O is?
Operations.
Thank you. And one of them in Wood County, 5,300 cows generating 55 million gallons of manure a year. So I asked her, do we have in DNR the scientists to stay on top of some of these issues like CAFOs? Let's listen to her answer. Agency critics, though, say with problems like Huana County, with polluted home wells, it's the wrong time over the last 4 years to cut the agency's number of scientists. What's your response?
One thing I really want to remind people of is that our agency is full of scientists. Okay, we've got biologists, geologists, hydrogeologists, all throughout the agency. They work out on the ground, managing programs, managing wildlife, our fisheries team, etc. And the thing I'm most excited about with this, Steve, is that we're going to have sound science upon which to base these decisions for the first time. And I feel really good about being able to put forth a rule package that I think is going to give greater confidence to the public that we serve, that their groundwater will be safer, and yet we can still have agricultural production in Wisconsin. I believe we can have both.
JR, in terms of the reorganization of the DNR, they're down 20% of their employees from the high. And so that's one factor driving this. And the other factor is she feels a need to realign this agency. In a Republican-controlled legislature, can you see this realignment drawing any major opposition, pushback?
It's moving toward what they've wanted for a while. Republicans have a philosophical difference with Democrats about how DNR should operate. They have came in saying this agency is anti-business. It's causing us problems, creating jobs. It is taking a ditch with water and calling it a water, pick any example you want that they've used over the years to say this agency is out of control and you rein it in. This is part of that reorganization. Now, the environmental groups, until you prove otherwise, are going to be suspicious of what's going on.
Boy, are they ever.
And fear that this can lead to a lowering of standards. We will see in the end, but I don't know, other than going to the court, how they're going to stop it, and I don't know if they would be successful going to court to try to stop it.
But a PS on that is the environmental groups has asked the federal EPA to come in and look at how properly Wisconsin DNR handles some of these permits.
Yeah, that may be their next avenue. I mean, look at the mine in northern Wisconsin that was proposed. It cleared regulations here. The EPA raised, one of the federal agencies raised concerns about it up north that would affect the waterways up there. So there is another layer of protections that environmental groups can go to and say, well, we struck out here, but we're going to go here and ask them to intervene.
Well, and you have to look at who President-elect Trump just named as head of the EPA.
Good point. Different agency nowadays.
I don't know if it's going to come swooping in and tell our DNR, slap it on the hands and said you didn't do very well. So it's very interesting. But it looks like that reorganization is going to happen. Well, part of the advantage of being Assembly Speaker is you get to name the standing committees, number one. Number two, who's going to chair them. And you and I counted, and Speaker Voss just created 37 standing committees just for the Assembly. I'm not talking joint finance, joint audit, things like that. And it's intriguing to me, you've talked to 5 incumbents who will not be committee chairs.
Yes.
So what's the story there?
Well, essentially, what's noteworthy is Andre Jacques.
Yes.
Start there. So there are 5 Republicans who are returning from this session who are not going to be a chair, on finance, or in leadership. Usually, if you're a returning lawmaker in the other caucus, you end up in one of those 3 spots. These 5 are not. Now, Robin Voss said part of this was sheer numbers. They're at 64 members, basically they've had since 1957, I believe.
Yes.
They're already at 37 committees. How many more committees could you possibly have? So these 5 struck out. Now Andre is the most interesting one because Andre chaired 2 committees this session and co-chaired a 3rd. Andre, though, back during the debate over prevailing wage repeal, had a committee hearing and a committee vote on a bill to repeal the prevailing wage, even as Robin Voss said, we don't have the votes in the Assembly to pass this bill. Now, if you look at it from, take the issue away from an operational standpoint, Andre Jacques did 2 bad things. 1, he crossed his speaker. 2, he undermined his speaker's negotiating position on that issue. So you talk to people, they're kind of surprised that Robin didn't pull him right then and there as chair. That would have been an option for him. So Andre survived that one, but then came back now, and Robin says, okay, well, if I can't trust you, if you can't be part of the team, you're not going to be in this position to violate my trust again. Yep. I go through the rest of the list. Kramer said he thought he had a good work relationship with the Speaker's office, a slap in the face that he didn't get a chairmanship, but he said, that's okay, I work for you, not for Madison. Janelle Branch, when I talked to her, said, you know, it's just going to be a sophomore this next session. I have time. I can wait my turn. But she took issue with the message coming out of leadership, she said, of punishing Andre over this thing with prevailing wage, and 2, talking about raising taxes right away, possibly as part of a transportation package. They just won election, this big majorities, off a not raising taxes message. So she had an issue with that. Stefan was the interesting one. I talked to him and said, hey, I went to Robin and said, I have time. If we go and give everybody committee chairmanship and extra staff, and that's the best message to voters who just gave us these big majorities, I'm okay sending this one out. I didn't catch up with Edming this week, but there is definitely a little bit of a vibe of some discontent in the caucus. But with 64 people, not everybody's going to be happy. You know, you can't make all of them happy all the time. The question always is, anybody lose anybody in the Capitol is, as long as you have half your caucus behind you, you can't be deposed. That's the threshold to watch. If people complain, fine. But for Robin, it's got to be 33 right now, right? Yes. As long as he has 33 votes in his pocket, he will be okay. But it could be a more difficult session for him than maybe would have otherwise if you have some discontents, malcontents going, hey, this guy has done this stuff with the Joint Finance Committee now, there's being some drama there, with these chairmanships, what's going on, talking about gas taxes, you know, there'll be some rumblings.
Yeah, but now let's draw on our few years, decades of experience in the Capitol. You know how important it is to legislative egos to be a committee chair. You get it printed on the front door to your office, and it gives you more bargaining leverage.
Well, you get bills, you get to shape legislation in the committee process. Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah, people come to you and say, could you hold a public hearing on my bill because I'm the chair, and these 5 don't have it. So these 5 took a set back, but the Assembly's not, in some ways, a democracy, is it? I mean,
no, and that's the other thing. Robin Voss sees a very strong speaker.
Yes.
And somebody who is not afraid to kind of say, I want this and you shall do this to stay in my good graces. You know, you have to run a tight ship. If you let the inmates run the asylum, and I don't mean to call the lawmakers inmates, but if you let them run things, you become weakened and they overrun you. That's not how you want to do things.
You're absolutely right. Okay, time for the stock picks.
Rising. So Brad Courtney, re-elected chair, Republican Party, unopposed. I mean, this is no shock, right? This guy won. They won Wisconsin electoral votes the first time since 1984. They won a U.S. Senate race and a presidential year the first time since 1980. They have the biggest majorities in both houses in decades. So no surprises, re-elected. Also has the backing of the governor, who's up in 2018. Will want his good friend as chair during that. Elevates Mark Morgan to executive director, wins praise from lots of Republican operators about that move. Now contrast that with the Democratic side right now. Martha Lanning will be up for re-election as her first term as chair in June at the convention. I talked to Mandela Barnes this week, his outgoing lawmaker, lost a primary against Lena Taylor, said he might run for chair.
Really?
People are unhappy.
Oh.
Martha just hired a new executive director, Jason Seidner, who had worked for AFSCME. So they're trying to kind of get back off the mat and figure what's going on. So the Republicans have a little more of a victory lap kind of feel, and Dems are kind of going, gotta get our stuff together right now.
Okay, but Mr. Courtney, of all the Republican chairs I've covered, is the most low profile. He really isn't. He's quite comfortable. He doesn't have to be at the center of the rally, does he?
Called an all-around nice guy. I mean, even people who don't agree with him think he's a decent human being. And he is low profile, but the result, you can't argue the results he's gotten as chair.
I agree. Okay, mixed.
So Sheriff Clark, we've been talking about
The
this
high
for a while.
sheriff, yeah.
Will he get a spot in the Trump administration? Well, maybe, but it won't be Homeland Security chair, or yes. So secretary.
Secretary.
So they announced that this week. Clark gets passed over. He's one of maybe 6 people we considered for it. He says, hey, I was there for Donald Trump no matter what, no strings attached.
He put
I'm
out
not
the good
worried by
soldier
this.
statement, right?
Reince Priebus, the incoming chief of staff, says they've been talking with Clark. He's a sharp guy, good friend and loyal. We're looking for a spot for him. So he may still end up in D.C., but what role will he be? Will he be a terrorism advisor or some kind of lower profile job? The other thing is he's still got problems percolating at home. These 4 deaths in the jail. He's kind of now gone on the offensive a little bit, saying, well, a couple of these people had real health problems and drug problems, so this really shouldn't be pinned on us, and it's really the county executive who oversees the health piece of this thing. So there's some problems at home for Sheriff Clark when it comes to his day job. And it raises the question, if he doesn't end up in the Trump administration, could he win re-election to his post right now with stuff going on? That's something to watch.
Well, I think he ends up in a Trump administration. I think they find room for him. Agree?
I think he really wants them to find room for him.
And I think that'll happen, given the high-profile role that he played before November 8th. Okay, falling.
So Jim Schmidt, Green Bay
Mayor of Green Bay.
Yes. So basically, he falsifies campaign finance reports. He gets donations above the legal limits, and he splits them up to other people in the family, and in one case, a fictitious donor. Now, he reaches a plea deal, he gets community service and a fine. He insists this is all a big mistake, just relying on bad advice. For some people, it's kind of hard to swallow a guy who falsifies his campaign finance report to say, oh, it's just a mistake. Right. So what's going on now is Schmidt has said, well, I might not run for election in 2019. He's resisting calls to step down. There is an option possibly the Common Council to remove him. It required 9 of 12 members, I believe, to pull him off. There was a petition filed, I think, just yesterday, seeking to have that done. Now, his lawyer says it can't happen because what he did was not really his mayoral duties. He only be removed, he says, for official duties. We'll see if that plays out. But if Schmidt is taken off office or resigns or whatever, or if he's run for election, watch Eric Genrich, Democrat from Green Bay.
Democratic state rep.
Often mentioned as a possible candidate for mayor someday down the road. So that's a guy to keep your eye on if anything does happen with Schmidt.
That's okay. That's a good pick for falling. Let's look ahead a little bit. We finished the recount on Monday. Then the Elections Commission recertifies the totals. There's apparently only minor changes. And then casting it forward yet another week, our Electoral College meets Monday the 19th.
And I will bet you money when Donald Trump comes into Wisconsin on Tuesday.
Tuesday to West Dallas.
He mentions the recount. What do you want to bet?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, he will. Think there's any coincidence that the recount is done on Monday and he's at?
Maybe that's too good. Maybe that's too good.
Gambling here in. Okay. I'm Steve Walders.
And I'm J.R. Ross.
That's Rewind for December 9th.
Rewind, your week in review, is sponsored by the Transportation Development Association of Wisconsin. Sharing one goal: enhancing the quality of life in Wisconsin through the development and maintenance of a strong transportation network. The Transportation Development Association of Wisconsin. It's how we get there.